please welcome Ann Hauser. Well, it's nice to be here, and it was very fun to be asked to talk about this because it made me do my own reflection about work-life balance. Oh, are you the driver? Oh, good. Go ahead and push the first button. I think I have a little fade thing going here. One of the things that I thought about when I thought about work-life balance, it's kind of like, okay, is that an oxymoron, you know, or is this some ideal state we're shooting for? And one of the things I was struck by when I was listening to all of you kind of introduce yourselves, and then when Judy was talking in particular, it's like, when I think about work-life balance, it's like, okay, are there really two things? But it's like the passion that I heard in everybody's voice about what you do. And I don't know if you're putting it on here because you're trying to sell yourselves or what, but it's like that's so much the key. And what I got from you, Judy, yeah, you probably like art and stuff, but did you really get what she really likes? Parties. How many times, whether it was art, whether it was this, it's like the coming together of people, and it's like parties, it's like, okay, like get it, what is it that jazz is young? Parties. One other story, Janie and I were talking before, you know, downstairs having a glass of wine and, you know, thinking about my own work and how I've been very, very fortunate. I think I was born with a lot of serotonin. I mean, it's in my mother's genetics. I mean, God rest their souls, she and all her siblings are passed, but bring them all together and they're just happy people. They wake up happy, they go to bed happy. Even without the alcohol they drink toward the end of the day. That's kind of what I've been blessed with, and I feel very, very fortunate about that. And what made me really think about that, one of my very first jobs in between junior and senior year in college, my very first time in Maine, I had a friend, and I lived in an apartment down on High Street, and I was a chambermaid on the 13th floor of this building. I had my little purple lavender polyester suit. I walked from the bottom of High Street up here every day and cleaned all the rooms on the 13th floor. I loved that job as much as I've loved what I've done ever since. It's like, huh? Like, you know, what was it? And as I thought about that, what I loved the most was all the women. This was their career. They were not doing this for some summer job to get themselves through college or to come to Maine, this cool experience. I mean, this was their profession, and somehow I had the wherewithal that summer to just be open to all that. And, you know, it's like, did I really like cleaning dirty bathrooms? You know, when I was done and looked, there was some sense of satisfaction. I was telling Janie at the end, the best thing, okay, this is in the 70s, shag carpet. Every time I finished cleaning a room, I had a plastic rake, and I had to rake the carpet so there were no footprints in it. And I got huge satisfaction of it. So I wasn't like looking forward to the day being over so I could go do something. I just was able to find like kind of fun and like, you know, raking the shag. So I think that's my bottom line here is if somehow you can get there, who needs work-life balance? But anyway, so let's see what I have on the next slide. And there is a microphone. I don't know, does anybody need me to talk in a microphone? I doubt it.
We're okay.
It's nothing I've ever been accused of.
We have competition here, but you're doing great.
Got a fan back here.
Okay, well, let me know, okay? You know, so are they really two different things? Vanna? Okay, so let's take one model. It's like, okay, say, all right, one is, yeah, okay, there's work and there's life. Vanna? So, in this model, it's like, work's what we get paid to do. All right, and guess what? Life is what we don't get paid to do. So if we just take that model for a minute, and then kind of go to the next little fade, if you think about this model, there are very clear boundaries. You know, you're either working or you're living. And in this model, I think there's an assumption that work subtracts from the rest of the other part of your life. That you can't wait to get done with the work so you can get to your life. You can get to the stuff you're passionate about. I mean, I think that that model is a lot of how our society operates. And actually, as I say that, I think it's actually the reason that one of the reasons that drove me into the work of human resources, as I think Judy said, my undergraduate, well, my only graduate, I didn't go to graduate school, my college education was sociology and social work, and I was in the social work field for the first 6 years after college, and I was in a supervisory position eventually, and any of you have been around Holy Innocents Home Care Service, and I had like 20 or 25 kind of homemaker home health aides, and what struck me was how many of them worked because they had to, and it was just the only thing they could do, and that there were others that was their passion, but I just started getting disturbed by people spend a lot of time working. That's way too much time. It was a new concept for me to be that up close and personal with people that I knew couldn't wait to get out of work so they could have their life. And that started me thinking about, what more I could do with kind of a foundation of sociology, which, kind of was my, at a young age, I guess, my passion and understanding kind of things about people and how they operate in groups. So that's kind of one way to look at it. So the next way to look at it is, the integration, kind of whether it's literal or psychological, because some folks, and I'm one of them, fortunate, have had the kind of work most of my career that I really could do some integration because of the nature of the work that I did and the organization I worked with. And I know some jobs just you cannot integrate. You have to be there at a certain time, you have to leave at a certain time. But even psychologically, I think there can be some integration. And in this model too, there's, how great if you have as much passion about what you get paid to do as about what you don't get paid to do. I mean, that's the ideal state. I mean, easy for me to say. I've been fortunate that has been the case. Really, other than a day here or there, but really in my career. Another one that, one adds to the other versus subtract. They're really kind of part of a whole, and if you're fortunate enough to have all the different pieces, whether it's serotonin or the kind of job or the work environment or all that, it's all additive, and nothing really subtracts from anything else. And if you have all that, it's like, what is balance anyway? Balance is, we just wish we had more hours in a day to do what we love to do. And guess what, so far 24 hours is about all there is. And I think it's kind of funny sometimes when we think about, we just don't have enough time, It's like there's this sense of, when it's a responsibility, it's a burden. But oftentimes I think that there's so many cool, wonderful things for us to do. And, and women in particular, the choices, be careful what we ask for. Like sometimes, well, I'll deny ever having said this, but sometimes don't you wish we didn't have so many friggin' choices? Because it's hard, and it can be, again, the positive side of there are so many great things, whether it's art, no matter what it is, in our families. So I think that's kind of a way to think about it. And in this model, you're living, working, you don't know what's what, you're not even always thinking about that. And again, whether it's concretely you have the kind of work that you can be sitting on the sidelines at one of my boys' sports games when they were little, and I'm on my little iPhone, wasn't an iPhone at the time, but I'm able to leave work at 3, go to their game, because I have this little gadget that I can see my emails, I can listen to my voicemail, I can stay connected, but I'm doing both things, and then after that I can either go home or I can go back to work. And so that's one way, very literally, to work, live, just mush it all up. But then if you don't have that kind of work or that kind of life, still, even psychologically, is it 5 yet? Is it 5 yet? So I can get out of here and do what I really want to do. So these are the kind of things I started thinking about when I started preparing for this. So what do I have up next, Amy. So here was something that I thought about that I think is a huge issue for humans, and I think it's huge for women. How do we balance wanting it all and like really taking accountability for figuring out what we can realistically achieve and have based on who we are? I think our biggest issue is really taking accountability for balance. It's like, what do we want? Is it realistic? And just making choices that fit with what we want, what we have the ability, the capability to do. I think that once we start pointing our fingers out there about there's something wrong out there because I don't have work-life balance, it's like we want it all. We have access to so much. There are so many great things, and I think it's kind of like being at a grocery store looking at, I mean, when was the last time you tried to pick a toothpaste? Seriously, how many choices are there? It really, I mean, I have to like get myself, like do my little thing to go, it's like, I really don't care. But still, I'm looking at about 35 different kinds. It's like, okay, just close my eyes and pick there. And I think there's an element of that really spreads throughout because there are so many choices. And we don't have, I think that often we don't hold ourselves accountable for just saying, okay, what can I, should I, do I want to take on as mine? Again, whether it's work, whether it's life, family, all that stuff. And have it be the size that we can stay centered, whatever size that is, because we always want more. So let's see. Kind of some of my experience, and I've already touched on some of it. Integration versus separation. Again, I've been very, very fortunate. Key levers for me has been passion. I've just, again, as I said, I can kind of find passion in almost anything that I do. And that's a real blessing that I have. I have a capacity for multitasking. That's just something that, I do. I can be at a football game and, reading this and doing this and doing this. Now, there's a downside to that, too, but the upside is I can do a lot of different things. It's just kind of how my brain is wired. And as I get older, it's not quite as easy. But I think that also really helps me kind of do some, whether it's called work-life balance, but really do a lot of different things and feel like I don't have to choose work or life because I can multitask, and that's a blessing. I do have a sincere impatience for doing what is not essential. And as I was thinking about that, well, at work, but also other places, one of the things I have to be careful of, at work in particular, is, in a big organization, it's like, oh, there's all this stuff you're supposed to do. And I've gotten really good at, I don't really think that, of really differentiating what is the important stuff. And, I'm at a level now where people would say, well, yeah, at your level, of course you can decide. But no matter what level I've been, there's a way of, okay, of really prioritizing and again, whether it's in my life or my work, it's like, okay, do I have to do it all, really? I bet I can get away with not doing this. And it's a skill. I think you have to have a little confidence to do it and to trust that you're not going to get nailed. You got to be in an environment where but that I think has helped. It's helped me. So, obviously a lot of this is, I don't know the answer to this. I don't have any answers. But what I thought is if I share some of my own experiences and thoughts, it might trigger some things. Either things you can leverage or things that, oh, maybe that's, maybe it's nothing you can leverage because it's not something that works for you. Supportive loved ones and colleagues. I mean, there's no question that, that's just, for me what it's kind of all about. Kind of like Judy, no matter what she does, it always ends up in a party. For me, what I really get is no matter what it is I'm doing or working or living or working, it has to do with kind of a human connection. And I think that when I track my career, and even when I was cleaning rooms up there, what I remember about it, other than the shag rugs, was the connections I had with those older women who that was their career. There's something about that that I got something out of. And technology. I mean, technology can be a huge benefit. You know, there's also a downside to that, but technology can be a huge benefit, I think, to work-life balance, defined a particular way, to allow us to do, you know, to be different places and be doing different things and stay tuned in. So what's next? How I've benefited? You know, I've been very successful in my career, and I never had any goal to be successful. That's just the truth. My goal, when I was first a social worker, my goal was to, by the time I retired, to make $20,000 a year. I was absolutely sincere. I mean, I just had no, and so for me, it hasn't been about a plan. You know, I met my goal. When I was offered a job at Unum in 1982, the offer was $19,900. I was like, oh my God, I got my goal. And then the rest is history. It was kind of all a total fluke. So for me, career success and all this balance, it was never part of a plan at all. You know, passion, it was like success builds success, and passion builds passion. You find something you're passionate about, and you just kind of get more passion. You have bigger parties. You know, the breadth of experiences. I mean, in some ways, I feel like I've had it all in some ways, and I feel very, very fortunate about that. And the downside, and this is important stuff, it's like, you know, being multi-present versus fully present. Well, I feel like I'm learning more about that as I get older. I learn, you know, I'm owning more of it, and you know, yeah, when I'm, you know, on the iPhone and watching my kid play football or reading them a story at night. My kids are now in their 20s, 22 and 27, so, you know, I'm not, well, actually, I would read them a story if they wanted me to, but the downside of kind of this, oh, I can do it all, I can do it, and, you know, reading them stories at night when they were young, and the words were coming out of my mouth, but up here, I was creating my to-do list. I mean, there's a, you know, I know that there's some things that do I regret or really feel guilty? Luckily, I don't carry a lot of that, but if I were to be honest, it's like, yeah, did I miss some things? I was there, but was I really, really there? And I think that's some of, for me, the downside of kind of how I've lived my life in this so-called work-life balance thing. Not always self-caring, I mean, that's for sure, and that's something that as the kids are grown and I have a little bit more, I have less responsibility in the world, especially relative to my kids, and you know, my parents are all tucked in heaven, and so I have less of that kind of responsibility. I feel like, you know, I'm getting a little bit more of the taking care of myself thing. Right now I'm in a good space about that, and it's, for me, it's like, who knows what tomorrow will bring. I'm just going to hope I can hang on to it. You know, breadth versus depth, whether it's of relationships, whether, you know, breadth is a cool thing. I mean, boy, you experience so many things, but, you know, when do you go deep? And that's, you know, that's a vine. About my mothering, you know, I kind of reference that. Sometimes I think, you know, I know if I had been a stay-at-home mom, my kids would not have benefited from that. I mean, I really did. I was not meant to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also am very aware, because of the way I've led my life and trying to have it all, and feel like I did have the work-life balance. There was some skimming of the surface, and you know, some ways that, you know, that I look back, and I know was the downside of, you know, some other things that were the upside, and so those are kind of things I just have to sit with. You know, kind of the outcome, always living, always working, and in that model for me, you know, I was not at the office 12, 15 hours a day. I mean, I didn't have the option when the kids were little. You know, I lived fairly close to the office, and that again was a great thing, because especially when the kids were kind of early teens, I could buzz home at 3:30, so they would know they weren't going to be in the house too long. I mean, they were old enough to be alone, but The older they get, it's like it's more scary for them to be alone. So I buzz in so they would know that you never knew when I was going to buzz in. Spend there 5 minutes, how you doing? I go back to work. And so again, that's kind of how I made it happen. But I never was somebody, and many times in my career, people have kind of watched me do what I do and like, can I meet with you? I want to kind of figure out how you like have done this. And like, I don't know. So then, and I say not long hours until lately, I was asked to take an assignment in South Carolina about 18 months ago. Unum has a little company down there, and they asked me to go down there and be the head of HR, you know, to kind of bring that company along in some ways that I had previously created at Unum. So, here's the deal. It's a totally different experience. You know, obviously Nancy and I are selling our house here and moving down there. Nancy stayed here, I went down here. The company, you know, made it work for us where every 2 weeks one of us was flying one way or the other, you know, for the sake of the relationship. I had an apartment down there. But when I was there, and so for most of the time, I was there other than 1 month, or 1 weekend a month. So I was really there. Well, so, okay, no distractions. No dogs to feed, no poop to pick up in the yard, no grass to mow, no weeds to pull, no snow to shovel, no friends or family to be with. Well, I mean, I was in the office all the time. And what was interesting about that wasn't because I had to. And some of it was like, what the hell else was I going to do? But I was so into the work. And I couldn't wait almost till 5 o'clock came. Everybody else would go home, because that would be the time. Because I also knew the sooner I got done what I needed to do down there, the quicker I could move back to Maine. So that was part of it. But I was amazed after 30 years of really a particular way of being with work and life and everything, my habits totally changed. And it worked fine. It was, I think, at a young age, especially once I started having kids, I mean, I didn't have a choice. I mean, you know, when you have stuff outside of work that you have responsibility for, I mean, you just make it work. And I was always grateful for that, and I'm even more grateful for the things that were in my life at a young age. Otherwise, I could now really understand how I could have let my career have me in the office 15 hours a day, and it might have actually been fine for me, but when I think about how ultimately I don't think that really would have been as fine. You know, for a stint, it was just very interesting. So, you know, the passion was the same though. What was very interesting, that time in South Carolina, and even now I still have an apartment there for just about another month, and I'll be back there in a couple weeks for a week, and I know the minute I get there, I will kind of be in a pattern that is about, you know, my life there was really about work, because that's what I was there for. Now, on weekends I did some fun stuff, and when Nancy would come down, we explored. So I did do exploring, but it was just kind of interesting. It's like the rhythm. And the word that has really struck me, and it's about kind of all of our lives, and whether it's balance or whatever, it's like, what's the rhythm? And what rhythm really works for you relative to your work and your life and your family, and take care of yourself and your friends, and kind of all that stuff. And now, okay, so I'm back here for the most part, and we'll be back here permanently soon. And it's like, okay, so what's my rhythm here now? Especially with an expanded role, and it's like I could easily need to be in the office 15 hours a day now, or 12 or 14, to really get it all done. Not necessarily because of my passion, because now it's like, you know what, Nancy's been picking up that dog poop for 18 months by herself. I got to get out of work so I can go home and feed the dogs if she's working late. And so now I have all this new responsibility. And so it's like, oh my heavens, how did I ever do this before? Because being down there, I had no responsibility other than work and just me. And there was something about that that was a relief. And I wouldn't want it forever, but I was able to really appreciate, I guess, the kind of stress or whatever that I do, that that comes along, or sometimes a freneticness or whatever, when I have all these wonderful things in my life that I love to do, including playing pickleball. But it's a game that's a little bit like badminton and ping pong on a miniature tennis court. It's very interesting. So anyway, so that's, those are the things I just kind of said, okay, those are my thoughts. I'm not an expert on this. I've got my life experience. And so I thought, okay, let me put that out there and see what y'all have to say about that. What rings true? What's your experience?
Being flexible. Very flexible.
Flexible, yeah. I mean, that's such a key.
Going with the change instead of fighting it.
Yeah.
And it's constantly changing. I think.
Yeah. Change is kind of inevitable. So, I don't know, what did I say that you say, that's nuts, or that makes sense, or that works for me?
Well, you made a point about making choices, and a long time ago, came across this quote by Lucy Swindoll, and she said, to choose for one thing is to choose against another. Not that any choice is good or bad in and of itself always, but you've got to weigh the choices, the consequences, whatever. And it's not set in stone that if you choose this way, it's going to stay that way.
Yeah.
So I think you've done a good job of that in your life, it seems. And then just the illustration of going from that flexible work-life flow into the, nose to the grindstone mode. That's a demonstration of how you make those things work when you need to.
Yeah, yeah.
I, too, am not a stay-at-home mother. And I always welcome that out in the workforce. I'm a late-to-life mother. My husband and I very deliberately chose to become parents. And, there's a lot of mother guilt. Even though I have the most wonderful husband in the world who, says, honey, go slay your dragons, go make your millions, and I'll stay home. Which I've tried to correct and tell him doesn't mean he gets to golf all the time. Which would be his druthers. But I think that's an important thing, is working women and mothers is dealing with that guilt.
Yeah. That's a big one. We just got to own it.
Yep.
And just make our choices and know that that's,
Well, you can feel very guilty as a single mom when you're in that situation that you can't do it all. But I had someone say to me one time, look, we make mistakes as two parents, so why would you think that, you can't make a mistake, or it's, you have decisions to make, and sometimes you make decisions that are really difficult and you can't see the result for a while. But then something shows that really was the thing you needed to do. And I think that's what gets you through being able to go through another change of sorts, is that if you live aware of things around you and other people around you, I think you just have a different life than if you're just centered on every problem that you have. Because everybody here has something else going on. You just spend 5 minutes talking to each other, and there's 2 things going on here, there's 3 things going on there, and all of the women in this room are all taking care of all these things. Now, to what degree are you taking care of something every day? There's the balance that comes in. What are you going to give to the most? And when my husband was sick and dying, I felt that I was pulling up shades all day long, because the first thing was to get the kids off to school, and I was mom, and then as soon as they were taken care of, I was at the hospital, and then I was at work, and then I was the work, and then I would leave, and I would back to the hospital. And I felt I was like shades going up and down all the time. And I don't know how I got through it, except that's just what I did. You just do that, because sometimes you have no choice. And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for all those things that we're constantly doing as women. And at times I think it's just a lot more than what men wouldn't do the same job. They just wouldn't do it. I have 5 brothers. There's no way they would do what I've done. They just wouldn't, because their wives make it happen for them.
Yeah. And the part we have to do, some of it we just have to do, and others we choose to do. And it's the choice stuff that I think is a real big one for us. I think we are capable of a whole lot more of the multitasking and all that, but you know, when do we take responsibility for, we've just chosen a few too many things for our own well-being. Whose fault is that?
There were 3 things that stuck out that you said. One of them was multitask, prioritize, and then find the right rhythm. And then when you use the word rhythm, that just kind of like set off a few lights, because that's what everything is. You know, when you look at the tides of the ocean, or you know, your breathing, or cycles, because to me cycles and rhythm are kind of the same thing. That if you can take, you're prioritizing your multitasking and put it in a good rhythm, that it's just, then it becomes more natural. I live and work, I'm not a clock watcher, I work for myself most of the time, and even some of the other jobs that I take that, you know, I'm being paid by somebody else, it never occurs to me that I'm working, but I'm not working. And even tonight, I'll probably go home and sit down and look at something for half an hour. So my life and work are all the same. And at first, I didn't know whether that was a healthy thing to do. And someone had pointed it out to me. It's like, you know, all you talk about is work. It's like, well, that's who I am, is my job. You know, I happen to have a great job. I'm a designer, and so it's fun, and there's a lot to it, but I can't separate the two. So seeing the multitask, prioritize, and rhythm, I want to try to weave that into something. So maybe I could use that as my guideline to make the choices of maybe not taking on too much, eliminating some things, so I can go and prioritize everything in the right way. That's a tough thing to do, because you have to really sit down and think about it, I think.
And once you have the rhythm, you don't have to think about
Exactly.
it. And that's the trick, because then it's easy to have.
It's like kayaking, you know, when you're going and, you know, you're going and the wind's on your back instead of going into it, and but I thank you, because these are things I think about this, but then when the word rhythm hit, it's like, all right, I understand that.
That was a big word for me when because I had a rhythm there. I have a rhythm in Maine when I was mostly there. But what I found when I was off center, when Nancy and I started transitioning back to me being here, because there was no rhythm, because I wasn't there, I wasn't here, I felt like I wasn't anywhere. And it was like, okay, where am I, you know, and when I, you know, go open a drawer at home and she decided to put something else in that drawer that wasn't, you know, which,
well, you weren't there.
Right, who am I to say? But I was like, that's not where the cellophane goes. So those things, I mean, little things like that.
It does throw you off.
It really threw me off, and it's like, boy, but it also made me very conscious, you know? It's like really conscious of what's going on, where for me too, rhythm can make me unconscious, and I can just do it without noticing it. So it's kind of the whole thing is really about conscious, whether you got rhythm, whether you don't. It's like paying attention to what the hell you're doing and what's going on. I think you want to say
Well,
something.
actually, the thing that resonated with me was the term rhythm. Because no matter how many things I have to fit in, I can manage to do it and feel good once I hit a rhythm. But it's when things keep interfering with that rhythm I've established that I go crazy.
Yeah.
What struck me was the idea of figuring out what's essential, because it seems like if you can do that, then everything else will fall into place. But that's a tough thing to do.
That's a big one, and when it's work and somebody else expects, that's one thing. But even in life, it's like what's really essential. You know, when I would come home for a weekend, and there were all these people I wanted to see, I hadn't seen them, I had to get really clear. I want to feel like I don't want to feel like my calendar is scheduled all day, and it's like, okay, what's really essential? What was essential for me to be at home, Nancy, the dogs, and at home, and you know, have people come to us. But it's like, okay, what's really essential here? Again, so I can have that, find that rhythm, even if it's for a short time.
That led to sort of my thinking about when you use the word being aligned.
Yeah.
makes me think I'm not aligned, I'm not in rhythm here. So I really stepped back. That little line was resonated
Yeah.
with me.
Good, but I think we're past time.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
Thank you
thank
so
you so
much.
much